Hey, my name is Blake. I'm a software engineer here at TempoDB, the time series database service. And today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about cursoring and what that means for your time series data. So, cursoring is a general concept that's common in most other databases. You'll see it in other databases such as MySQL or PostgreSQL. And what cursoring allows you to do is to read a stream of data, potentially very large, usually very large stream of data, in a very easy to use primitive. So what does that mean for you? So most of the time when we talk about time series data, we talk about collections of data points. Now, one way in most programming languages that you can model collections of things is just using a simple array, right? Arrays are simple. Almost all programming languages have them, and they're a very easy to use primitive that we can work with. Now, what happens when we have data that doesn't necessarily fit all in memory at once, right? If we need to access streams of data that are maybe years long, let's just say we have a year's worth of stock data, for example, we'd like to be able to use a primitive that gives us easy access to that data without any performance issues. So we'd like to be able to access it in constant memory. And to process it iteratively, right? And what that means for you as a developer is you'd like to be able to process your data as one logical piece, but do it performantly in chunks. So let's jump over to an example and see how that fits in with time series data. So again, I mentioned, let's just say we have a stock application. So we're storing stock data in TempoDB. And what that means is that we're going to have one series here. And in this case, I have a series that has 10 data points in it. Now, let's just say, for example, that this is a series that tracks one stock, and we've got 10 different price readings at different times, and the value represents the price that the stock would be at that time. Now, for this example, I'm going to do a short stream here, but you can imagine for stock data, we might have years and years and maybe even decades of data that we might have to sift through. Now, if we just try to pull all this data back at once, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a performance issue for your application. Responsiveness is going to go down, and it's going to make for a really poor user experience. So how does cursoring apply to this? So again, let's talk through this as a simple example. Let's go ahead and say we'd like to do a read of this data. So we'd like to read through this entire stream all at once. We're going to say that this cursor has a chunk size of 2. And what that means for you is that when we go to fetch data from the server, we're going to fetch it 2 data points at a time. Now, in reality, when we are actually using TempoDB, we're going to do much larger chunk sizes. We might be potentially pulling back thousands of data points at a time. But just for the sake of example, let's go ahead and just show you 2. Now, most of the time when you're accessing this data, you don't want to think about chunking, right? You want to think about reading the stream from start to finish, from beginning to end. And this is where cursoring comes in. If we have chunk size of 2, all of these things collapse here into one cursor, right? Which means when you specify your read query to pull back this data, you give a series key, a start point, and an end point. And then you get to access this data like it's one logical stream. And what that means is, in practice, is I run this query, and then I'm able to access my data points very iteratively. Just like this. So I'm going to write some pseudocode here just to show you. So I get to treat this as one logical stream of data, which is how it's stored in TempoDB, and then do something with it, right? Maybe for this case, we'll just print the data point, but you can think of whatever application you want to do. Now, one of the really neat things about this is, again, I talked about processing this data iteratively. What this means is that because we're processing this data iteratively, we can either continue the computation all the way to the end, in this case to 10, or we can bail on it early. Let's say we get halfway through the stream here. Let's say we only get up to V4, and we decide we found the data we're looking for. Well, we can bail out of the computation and not pay the remaining costs of all this stuff down here. So we don't have to pay the network overhead, the fetching overhead, the computation overhead, et cetera, which is really nice. Let me explain to you what the benefits are of that. So let's say you're rendering a user interface. You want to show this stock data to your customer. What that means is if you're trying to fetch all this data at once, let's just say it was a year's worth of data, we might have to sit here and spin for a long time, show a spinner or something that's unresponsive to the user, versus if we're doing something like cursoring, we're pulling back equal-sized chunks, similar to how you might do like pagination or something like that. What that means is I can immediately start rendering this data as the chunks come in. As the data comes in, I can start rendering it. So the time to first byte is very low versus paying this cost all at once and then having to stream it all out, etc. So this is really a good thing, right? You can show a more responsive application. You can start rendering data to your customers faster. And it just makes it a lot easier to process streams that could potentially even be unbounded. So now where is this used in the TempoDB API? Most of the time, in this case, almost all of the cursoring endpoints are our read calls. So when we're dealing with series data, right? Anywhere we might do something like pagination, you can also substitute cursoring, right? So series, data points are common use cases where we end up using cursoring. So this is a brief tour of cursoring. Again, my name is Blake. And if you want more information and you want to check out some more things with TempoDB, visit our developer documentations on our website. And thank you again for watching. Take care.